Hello and welcome to a special video. I've been wanting to make this one this week because for whatever reason, United fans, we just can't help ourselves. Isn't that the fun of the game anyway? From having these debates, these discussions, getting into these camps, these player FCs, these manager FCs, these, I don't know what you would call it. We just need something. And maybe it's because there's only one game a week and there's too much time in between the games and everybody gets bored. And when we don't win, we've got to find a reason why we didn't win and figure it out, even if it has nothing to do with why we didn't win the game. But this week's discussion is about Kobbie Mainoo. Seen an enormous amount of debate, talk, very much a lot of extremes in different directions around Kobbie Mainoo, his situation, his inappearance off the bench. But I think it's deeper than that. I think there's a lot of people who are worried that Kobbie Mainoo's not a starter on a regular basis in Manchester United's best 11 right now and believe that that should be the case, while there's other people who seemingly go in the far extreme of thinking we should just sell him because he's not good enough and they don't have the patience for young players. And then you get a lot of people who are probably in the middle, like myself, who take a bit of a different stance. Now, before I get into this Kobbie Mainoo debate, and I want to present a whole bunch of stuff here, I want to, up front, share my opinion, purely my opinion on the matter. And it's been my opinion for a long time. Number one, I think it is okay for Kobbie Mainoo not to be a starter. I think that there is a strong plan for him to be, in the long term, the guy at United. I think there is a plan for him to be the eventual successor to Bruno Fernandes, and I think that's the best plan for him. I want him to stay. I want him to be successful, but I want him to be successful in the right position, under the right circumstances, and develop into the right player. And I don't think that it's beneficial to do that by just tossing him in out of position to do different jobs simply because you want to see him on the pitch. But I want Kobbie to stay. I think he has serious potential. I think he has incredible talent, and he will be a top player. But I also think he's not at the moment. And he has a lot of things to work on, which he should at 20 years old. Even some of the best players of all time. A lot of examples have been drawn to things like Paul Scholes, different skill set, mind you, but sometimes it takes more time to round out that skill set and develop it. So let's look at this Kobbie Mainoo debate, and we'll talk about Ruben Amorim and a whole bunch of other stuff. So here we go. PowerPoint's back for this one. He's only 20 years old. There are two different types of managers. I think it's important to address this point when we get going at the start, and to understand what we're dealing with with Ruben Amorim as the current manager of United, who's been selected to lead and rebuild Manchester United. The first type of manager is a philosophy, ideological system manager. A few different ways you could describe this. They have a defined style of play. They look at their team and they say, what do I want from that position? Not what do I want from a player, what do I want from that position? What do I want my 10 to do? What do I want my wingback to do? What do I want my striker to do? Similar, good examples of this are Pep and Klopp, as I've shown there, and Conte as well. These managers tend to require a fair bit of turnover because they need very specific profiles in their system, in their team. The players are supposed to adapt to the manager and the system rather than the other way around. And it needs really strong profiling and recruitment so that you can put together all these complementary pieces and have the right profiles in place so that you can build it correctly. The second type is the pragmatist manager, what I always call the chameleon manager myself. This is the manager who doesn't necessarily have a set style of player system. They might have ideas and philosophies about football, but they don't necessarily have a formation. We're going to always play this way. They change a lot and they adapt a lot. They look at the squad and they say, what does that player give me? What does that player do? What does that player do? What does that player do? And they base their team around that. What all these players do, put those players together and figure out which ones they should pick to give them the best chance of winning games. Thomas Tuchel, Thomas Frank, Ancelotti, I think are good examples of this. And ones that, and I've given, mix of examples there. Thomas Frank done this at Brentford for years, adapting, changing to the style of play, deep block, counters, different types of things, what have you. Thomas Tuchel, same thing, very adjustable. Same goes for Carlo Ancelotti. With these types of managers, I think you do get quicker results, and I think you get a bit more plug and play. You have a squad that's working, or you have a squad that's full of very talented players that maybe there's some good matching profiles in there. You plug them in, boom, they manage the team. You look at what Ancelotti did coming back to Madrid, get them going, and obviously in different circumstances over career, what Tuchel did at Chelsea in that instance, drop them in, boom, figure out how to organize the team and get results. They still need, of course, profiling and recruitment because there may be things they just are simply missing, but it's not as stringent in the other way of how you have to recruit for them. And they can usually keep and make use of more of the existing players that you have rather than turning them over so much. Now, Ruben Amorim is really, really, really strong philosophical system manager. He is. He's this doesn't mean in this case that a manager isn't flexible. Same goes for like Klopp, Pep especially. Pep adapts a lot. Pep can be very flexible, but he tends to adapt once he's already got the foundations in. He's not necessarily adapting to the players. He's often adapting and evolving in his style and then going and getting new players to put out a new style. So he decided, hey, I want a more traditional number 9, then got Haaland. Didn't get Haaland and decide I want a more traditional number 9. He decided he wanted a more traditional number 9 and did that. These managers change. Ruben Amorim changed in his ideas at Sporting to a degree in how he wanted to play in different ways and made adjustments. They do change, but they don't change just because they're given new players. They get different ideas and then they tend to get new players to match it. Ruben Amorim's a very, very strong philosophical manager. He says, this is a quote from him, and he said, I said it in the interview, I'm not the coach who's going to try to survive to put an idea that is not mine. Since day one, it's the only way I know. Let's build the base. Are we going to suffer? Yes. So again, he's not going to go into the squad, take a look at all the players and say, cool, I'm do whatever I can to get the most out of these players. He came in and said, I want to play my way, what I want. That's what I was hired for. Let's see what we can do. And then has figured it out. Now, the result of that has been, of course, a ton of players kicked out, a ton of players moved on from the squad, players who don't fit, players who do fit, and he's asked a lot of players to adapt to the way he wants to play as well. He was brought in specifically by the hierarchy to play a system and philosophy, not to adapt to a team viewed as a Frankenstein built of many different parts. Now, this is another aspect that I think has to come into serious consideration here. Manchester United did not have a team that was built of cohesive parts. It was a Frankenstein. It was a bunch of Frankenstein's monster, I should say. But it was a team built of a bunch of different random parts that don't really fit together to make something very functional. So no manager could come in and try to make it work if they're that type of manager. And that's why they wanted a philosophical system manager. Come in, lay down an idea, and let's recruit with one philosophy and idea in mind, top down, so that we don't have this Frankenstein's monster. It was well known that significant turnover would be needed. And again, his question he asks is, what do I want from that position? What do I want that position to do? And he will ask the players to adapt to that or go. If they can adapt, they'll succeed. If they can't adapt, then they won't. That's what Ruben Amorim essentially brings in philosophy. If you can adapt to what he wants from the position, you will play. If you can't, you will go. Alejandro Garnacho couldn't adapt to what he wanted, dropped and out. Casemiro has, and now he's become an important part of the team again. So what does he want, right? What position? What position could Kobbie play in? Kobbie realistically could be discussed for 3 different positions in Ruben Amorim's team. The 10, the 8, and the 6. He's played in each of these positions at times under Ruben Amorim. Actually, the game against Arsenal, the first game week, was the first time that Kobbie didn't play as a starter or substitute when not injured since Amorim's first game as manager. So to a degree, it's a little bit dramatic. Okay, it was the first time he didn't play since Ruben Amorim's first game in management, where Kobbie was also returning from injury at that time, the first time when he wasn't injured in the league. So let's look position by position. Here's the chart on this. This was at the top Ruben Amorim's first game. The rest of this, he played every single game in the Premier League when he wasn't injured. So it's a little dramatic, okay? It's a little dramatic. It's not like Ruben Amorim doesn't want to try Kobbie Mainoo, okay? Let's be real for a minute. I'm going to shrink this back down again so I don't keep blocking so much. The 10s. What do the 10s bring under Ruben Amorim? What are their traits? We purchased Cunha and Mbeumo this summer, two of the best players in their position in the league. What does he want? He wants fast players in this position, hard runners, players who can get vertical very, very quickly, who get up and down the pitch with a lot of speed, a lot of pace in creating artificial transitions, in transitions, and in regular, states. Lots of runs in behind. The front three have to be very fluid in the way that they drop in and run deep into those channels as well. They need to be top creators, crossing and passing. Remember that, in this system, the 10s tend to also be goal scorers, but also creators. They have to be able to do everything. They have to cross well. There's a lot of things they've got to do really well. They offer midfield support, dropping in with players on their back, being able to pick it up, turn, do all of that, and get it up the pitch. They're primarily, in most phases of play, what I would call big space players. They are big space players in the build-up and for quick artificial transitions. This is a primary part of Amorim's attack, like Liverpool under Klopp. You take like Mane and Salah. Yeah, they're good in tight spaces in the final third, but they're big space players, a lot of pace. They can play in lots of open room around them and get you up the pitch very, very quickly. So when they look at which of these suit Kobbie, the reality is he's not fast. He's not necessarily a fast, hard runner. He's not going to be the guy making lots of runs in behind. I don't believe he's a top creator, crosser, passer in the way that Acuna and Mbeumo or a Bruno Fernandes might be. And he's definitely not a big space player. These are not his strengths, okay? He's not a big space player, and a lot of that obviously aligns with the hard runner, lots of running behind. The 10s, we could see it. Even Bruno's not this. Bruno is not a big space player. He's not a running behind player, and he's not a fast player. That's why he's dropped Bruno from the 10s and brought in new ones, because in an ideal world, he gets these types of things. And you can even see with Mason Mount, even though he may not be as fast as like Acuna and Mbeumo in the open space, he has this extreme kind of quickness in getting up and down that he's done quite well. What Kobbie can do really well from the 10, the one thing he has that I think he would be very good at is offering that midfield support. So more similar to Mount in the ability to drop in, receive the ball with players on his back, turn, lay it off, spring the attack, things like that. Kobbie would be great at that. But that's like his one trait that fits the 10. So the 10 is not his ideal position. And in terms of what Ruben Amorim wants from his 10s, he's going to look and say, I've got Cunha, I've got Mbeumo, I've probably got Ahmad, and I've probably got Mount, who could all do the job more. Probably Xerxes too. Now, Xerxes may be more similar to Kobbie in this respect, but he does... But that's one of the reasons he struggled as well at times, is not necessarily being that, that big space player and those runs. And that's why he's probably not going to be a starting 10. But he's got a lot of options here that are at least as suitable as Kobbie or better. The 8 under Ruben Amorim. Bruno shifted into this position. Morita at Sporting was highly praised by Ruben Amorim for what he brought to the table with this. Let's do it like that. I'll shift it over. There we go. That'll be good. And then I can make it a little bit bigger. He praised him a lot at Sporting for what he offered. And if you read up on Morita, it's kind of interesting the what he had. He looks at this position as an all-action midfielder. They've got to be able to attack. They've got to be able to defend. They've got to be able to get around the midfield. Swiss Army knife type of player. One of the things that they're very important for them to do in the attack, and I'm going to get to this later as well, is to help overload the opposition back line. When you've got, when you get into the attack, that you've got the wing back, the 10, the striker, they can, don't do that, camera. They can do this thing where they will help to overload that back line. So that's one thing they do. cover ground at a high rate. This is one thing that the 8 is definitely asked to do, to get up into the attack, but they're also a part of the pivot. They've got to get deep as well in different phases and defend in transition, and they have to be able to do those rotations into the back line at times to help with build-up. This is why they're all action. There's going to be different times they're asked to do different things. They have to be very, very flexible. Can Kobbie do these things? I think he can do a lot of them. I think Kobbie can definitely be an all-action midfielder. I think he definitely has. I think one of his definite strengths is that intelligent play in the final third, dropping into the spaces to overload the opposition backline and attack. We've seen him do that, where he can get into the right areas, use that kind of intelligent attacking way to make a late run, to crash the box, to get in there. Kind of like you would see, this is something Mason Mount could probably do well, also something that Bruno can do too, but Kobbie would be very good at that. Also, Kobbie rotations into the back line, receiving the ball, bringing it out of pressure, picking it up from deep and things like that in different formation, different setups. Kobbie can do a lot of this. Where he's weak at is covering ground at a high rate. I think that's one of the main things that Bruno brings to the table that gives Amorim the confidence in dropping him into that position. A lot of his positions require a lot of ground coverage. But this is something that, Bruno does do very well that I think Kobbie needs to work on. Factually, does not cover ground at a high rate. He's not as, he doesn't, whatever it is, whether it's athleticism or what have you, he just doesn't. And again, it's something he can work on, and they have been working on it. But he fits a lot of the characteristics for this position. Then there's the 6, Casemiro playing here, and Ugarte competing for that position. This is the anchor in front of the defense. They sit in front of the back line. They have to be very, very good in the air. They have to have strong defensive awareness, be able to sniff out danger. They have to have a high dual win rate and possessions won. They have to be, as a bonus, able to switch the play and help with their long passing and things like that. Because you want them sitting, you don't want them necessarily moving up the pitch for small passes or carrying it. You want them sitting deep and kind of hitting those out balls. As a bonus, this is what Yeoman brought that he was better at than Paulinho and Ugarte. This is what Casemiro does that is an extra bonus that is not necessarily a requirement for the position, but something that obviously Ruben Amorim has made use of and likes when they can do it as well. Can Kobbie play this role? I don't think so. He's actually, I've seen some interesting things on this. Aerial duel strength-wise, Kobbie Mainoo is in like the bottom 20%. Casemiro is one of the best aerial duels in football. Ugarte is actually significantly above average on this too. Defensive awareness and sniffing out danger, I don't think is Kobbie's strong suit. He doesn't have a particularly high dual win rate out of possession and possessions won. That balances into aerial duels as well. And he doesn't really have the long passing that you'd want from this position. I think this is the worst position for him. Now, the argument could be made, well, he could just put him deep in the midfield because he can just receive the ball off the back line and turn. Fine. But that's not the traits that are being asked for by Ruben Amorim. Those are things that are good, but that's not what he wants. Kobbie Mainoo is not a 6 in this position at all. He's not the guy you want sitting in front of the back line. And if you watch my video from the other day, the tactical one showing like Casemiro and the 6's positioning with the center backs, that is not Kobbie Mainoo's role, and that is not where he should be playing. And that is not his strength. And it's just not where Ruben Amorim is going to see him as the best player in that position as of this time. So, he's not really competing for that position. So what he can do is he can sit in front of the back line, like I say, and receive the ball off of the back line. But these other factors are not things that he really would be the strongest at. These do not suit his play styles. So yeah, really, when you look at it, at the end of the day, in this system, there's really one position for Kobbie Mainoo, and it's the 8. He's an all-action player. He's a solid defender, not necessarily as a shield, but as an all-action, get around, make tackles, win. He's good on the ball in the midfield. He's good in the small spaces, strength, off of the back line, the opposition's back line, and attacking, as well as receiving it and rotating into the back line as necessary to pick up the ball. He's very intelligent around the final third. He's a good carrier of the ball. He's got a good shot on him. His ground coverage is a weakness. So when I look at all of these things together, he does a lot of the things you want from an 8, especially probably in the opposition's half and in the attacking areas. And I think that's where he can have the greatest impact. But Bruno is there. And that's just the reality that we have to face. Now, a lot of people have brought up before and saying like, oh, it was no problem previously. He was fine under Ten Hag. No, he wasn't. I'm sorry to say. Kobbie Mainoo, this is Kobbie and Casemiro, who played as a bit of a partnership under Ten Hag in Ten Hag's second season, which was really Kobbie Mainoo's first season. He was in the pivot with him. And, you know, he had virtually no impact on the offensive game. When you look at his numbers at that point in time, he was running like a dog under there. Okay, he was deployed next to Casemiro primarily. Again, that's still right where he would play now, but Bruno is there. So it's really not that different anyway. He did well, not saying Kobbie was at fault at this, but in 23-24, United's midfield was horrible. And it's not because of the players, but because of the tactics. We were constantly destroyed in the midfield and overrun. Kobbie and Casemiro were asked to cover impossible spaces, and they were spending all their time defending these massive transitional gaps and things like that. And the complaints at that time were very, very strong that Kobbie was being made into a defensive mid and being asked to do sprints up and down the pitch. So the current kind of complaints like, oh, it's better before and he was getting a chance under... No, not really. He was playing, not successfully. He wasn't becoming a better footballer. In fact, quite the opposite. In many instances during Ten Hag's time over that season, as we got later into the season, he was being ruined and run into the ground in that position and having no impact on the game, and United's midfield was terrible. Ten Hag's midfield setup was catastrophic, and Kobbie didn't really manage to get into any attacking positions. Now, right at the end of the season, people go, oh, the FA Cup final. Yes. At the end of the season, adjustment was made in the final 3 games of the year, with Ten Hag adopting a false 9 and a 3-man midfield where he played Amrabat, McTominay, and Kobbie Mainoo, which allowed Kobbie to get forward, scoring against Newcastle and in the FA Cup final. He scored in both of those games right at the end of the season. Because he was then deployed in a 3-man midfield as in a way that allowed him to rotate up into the attack and contribute, and it was his best position. It wasn't like he was doing that the whole year. That's why I say people misremember this. He was stuck deep in a pivot, not doing particularly well. When it became a 3-man midfield that offered him the freedom to get forward, he had some very successful games. Then 24-25 came. The end of that season showed that Kobbie could be very influential as a late arriving box crashing midfielder in a 3-man midfield, but his success as a part of a 2 was fairly limited. Then, the following season, Ten Hag threw him back into the pivot. Even worse, he threw him back in next to Christian Eriksen, converting Kobbie into a full-time cleanup man. This is the charts between them, and you can look at how much he struggled with this, because Christian Eriksen, as opposed to Casemiro, did 0 defensive work. This made it way worse for Kobbie, because then he was essentially playing next to another attacking midfielder who was not doing the defensive work, and this extra loaded the burden onto Kobbie Mainoo to play defensively. Rather than getting partnered with Manuel Ugarte at that time, who would do the defensive work so Kobbie could be freed up, he was partnered with Christian Eriksen. So again, he was not used correctly or in some situation where he was able to thrive previously. He was playing a lot of games, but it wasn't going well. In fact, in Kobbie Mainoo's first 7 games, he led the league in tackles, while United were a low-possession, deep defending team. Now, you can actually go back to my videos in I think it was after the 4th game of the season, and I was showing the stats that Kobbie was leading the league in tackles, and I said, this is bad. This is a warning sign. This is not what Kobbie should be doing, and it's a bad sign for the team that we are still getting dominated and overloaded and asking one of our best possession and potentially attacking players to become a full-time defensive 6, and we're not even deploying Manuel Ugarte to help him and support to free up the burden of defensive duties so that he can be more of the ball player in the team. And it was a warning sign, and he was burning out, and he promptly picked up yet another injury. And he did struggle last season after that injury to look as quick as he did previously. He had 0 goals and assists in those games, as he had 0 goals and assists in like a 20-game stretch under Ten Hag until that end of the season. And he was often just far too deep. Now, under Amorim, he played in the pivot, and he had some big games alongside a defender, like with Ugarte. I think Liverpool comes to mind at Anfield, a few other games like that. He did struggle with the defensive aspects per Ruben Amorim and picked up another injury, but the team at that time was far less settled, far less, put in place. We know the team was very chaotic last year and wasn't ideal for him. He was trialed in the 10. You can see kind of there, he was played in the 10 quite a few times, but it was fairly unsuccessful. The focus over the summer and on that has been improving on his fitness and athleticism, and Kobbie has been deployed purely as an 8 so far through the preseason. Again, looking at that kind of weakness of just ground coverage, just improving in that area. Does this role suit Kobbie? Well, Kobbie can play as the 8, which can be a 10. Kobbie's strengths are closer to the right skill set for Ruben's 8, as we've covered. Even then, he's better at the small spaces aspects, especially in the final third. But late stage advanced Amorim ball is perfect for Kobbie Mainoo in the 8. As the team gets better, the 8 in many phases moves into the attacking midfield. The central center back being aggressive reduces defensive burden in transition. And I want to show this because I cover this exactly in the tactics video, and I want to show exactly why the 8 is the perfect role for Kobbie Mainoo in the long term because it is also an attacking role. So if we look here and we look where the ball is and say in the build-up, right? We saw this a lot, this inverted center back. Well, where does the 8 end up in this position? In many instances, if it's Kobbie Mainoo, they're going to move almost up here into like a 4-2-3-1, where they're going to be in the midfield behind the front 3 or next to them. And their job in this instance in build-up is to intelligently move around the ball, move from side to side, drag defenders around, receive the ball in these tight spaces or from the 10s when the ball comes into them, turn the ball, drive it up the pitch, and get it forward. That suits Kobbie Mainoo. When you get into the attack, into a more settled attacking position. Actually, let's do the defending first so I don't have to move so many people out of positions in order to do this. Now, defending in transition as well, one of the things that I showed is that, let's get these guys all where they're supposed to be. When United lose the ball and the 8 is often joining the attack and caught up the pitch, one of the things that I showed is that this deep 6 is almost always right here. Now, one of the things that wasn't happening, and this was increasing the burden on this 8 to get back, is that the center backs were not aggressive, and this area around the 6 is getting overloaded. This means when the 8 is caught up the pitch, they're constantly trying to bust back to try to keep up and defend these areas, when really, in many instances, they're almost playing as another 10. The answer to this is what we saw against Arsenal, that the center back, especially the central center back, has to step up and defend against the number 9 in these positions, and the back line has to be aggressive. This essentially once again means that, of course, the wingbacks have to get back very fast. They always do. That you're almost once again defending in a 4-2-3-1. 4-2-3-1, right? And so this 8 is essentially defending almost as a 10. So it's reducing the defensive burden in transitions as well once the team gets settled right in doing this, especially in transition. Now, once you get into the deeper half, then of course they're going to have to come back and defend in the pivot, but that's totally fine. There's no issue, with Kobbie Mainoo doing that kind of role. He's done it many times. So in multiple instances there, it's going to reduce as Amorim ball gets going, his dependency to be so deep all the time and be allowed to get forward almost as the advanced midfielder in a 3, which would be his best role by far. It would be his best role, and Bruno's best role is the advanced midfielder in a 3. As we get further into that, that's what it'll look like. Then you move all the way up into attack. Now, again, in an ideal world, when Ruben Amorim football gets going, it looks just like any other team in football. It becomes an attack essentially a 3-2-5 or a 3-1-6. And that is where you need this intelligent movement from this number 8, where they're supposed to be very, very kind of flexible. Let's move the 6 out here, kind of in this area. Move the 10s kind of out here. Move the 9 up to here. There. Where essentially what you're wanting to do, let's get rid of that. As the 8 as the other team is settled and you move into this 3-2-5 in attack, is find the gaps. Find the ways to overload the back line where you can get into these kind of areas on either side, crashing the box, attacking the different angles, coming through these kinds of positions where you can find overloads in the back line and take advantage of them and move into there to create those imbalances, to drag defenders so that you've got your fullback 3 and sending them through. The 8 can be super influential in the final third in the way that they, move the team into the attack and create those advantages. So this, again, is the best role for Kobbie Mainoo. It's not one of these. Coming from deep and attacking as essentially almost basically a forward or as a winger, but it is in this position, and it's not here, sitting further deep trying to dictate potentially play at that point in time and be ready to break up transitions. It's moving intelligently along the back line of the defense to try to break them down when United are in possession. So almost every one of these phases of play really suits Kobbie Mainoo in the long term and Bruno Fernandes, and that's why it's the best position for him, and it's a great role for him in the future. He's just 20. His best position is Bruno's best position. It's the perfect opportunity this season to build up in this role without the pressure of needing to match Bruno's output, because we have Bruno, because we have one game a week, because he can be a sub and he can be a rotation player. In the meantime, athleticism and physicality has been the biggest focus for the entire team in recruitment and in everything this summer, for the club, for Ruben, for everybody, because it's been such a weakness at United. And he can improve in these areas and become more of an athlete and a bit more physical in these things. It is a necessity, and it's not like it's some horrible thing to ask a young player and a player in a Premier League team to become very physically robust. It's a vital necessity. United have been beaten physically for far too long, and they need that physicality, and Ruben Amorim's team relies on that. Long-term, he can be the successor to Bruno, which requires a willingness from his side to work into that role and understand that, and for everybody to go that way. We don't need some sort of manager versus player war. It doesn't have to happen. We don't need this. Plenty of young players like Scholes got time to bed in, but also got to do so in an environment that was already settled. So I think the Kobbie debate is there shouldn't be one. There shouldn't be a Kobbie debate. He should be simply allowed to evolve and develop into his best position without needing to be the main man from day one, without needing to be that guy right off of the bat. There are things he's not the best at yet. Every player has weaknesses. Every player has faults. Ruben Amorim, by not putting him out of position, is, I think, doing him a favor of not shoving him into a spot that's going to overplay his faults and have him end up burning out and trying to make him into something he isn't. Instead, getting him to play in the right positions is going to be, what works. I'm sure he will get plenty of minutes over the season, plenty of appearances over the season, plenty of games over the season, plenty of time to work into the team. He will. And I think in the long term, that's going to play out very, very well for him. He fits a position in Ruben Amorim's side. I think it's a nonsensical argument to say that, this thing like if your system can't fit Kobbie Mainoo, it's a bad system. The system can fit Kobbie Mainoo, but it also has a Bruno Fernandes. You just have to understand that. We have a Bruno. If we didn't have a Bruno, Kobbie would be starting every game in that position, and it suits him. So, the system does suit Kobbie Mainoo, but you don't have to force every single player in there. It is okay to have depth. It is okay to have time. It is okay to have rotation. That being said, it is also okay to say that Kobbie Mainoo needs to become a bit more of an athlete and to cover ground a bit better, because a lot is asked of players. And most systems in the Premier League this season require top athletes. The league has become as a whole more transitional. The league has become as a whole more fast attacking and direct. It requires a lot of up and down. And I think that's where Kobbie can improve, but also by not having to play every game in that way, he won't burn out and he can develop into that role and he can stay fresh. So I think that it's a silly debate. And I think that what I really don't want to see happen and what I really don't like seeing happen is this thing of like, this becomes the next thing that has to be used as a stick to beat the manager with. We don't need to be player FC. We can just support the players. We can just support the manager. We can just support the team. And at the end of the day, the goal is to win games. And the goal is to be the best team possible. And, you know, right now, we don't need to change a whole bunch of things and play an extra midfield position and change the way that we want to play football to fit another player in when he can very much grow into that role. So I'm begging the United community, just let it be. Let Kobbie Mainoo develop into the player he can be, and he will play. And don't put that burden on him of needing to play every game at 20 years old. And also recognize that it doesn't need to be this thing against the manager when a young player doesn't play every single game. We have Bruno Fernandes. He's a great player in that position. He's done so much for the team. He has incredible output. It happens. Sometimes imagine being the quarterback who's drafted behind Tom Brady, or, you know, it's like these things happen. And sometimes you just have to live with that and move through those positions and figure it out and figure out how to make an impact in the team. And Kobbie Mainoo will, because he's very, very talented and he will become a great player, I think. And I believe that he will become the successor to Bruno over the next year or two. And that 21, 22 years old, if he becomes the main man in the team and a successor to Bruno, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So those are my thoughts on the debate. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, leave me your thoughts below. I'll see you in the next one.